had no idea where to begin. It was 10 till 2 a.m. I was sitting on my couch, laptop in its eponymous resting place, listening to moody electronic music, trying to figure out how I could possibly wring out any creative juices from the damp dish towel that had become my brain. I'd been tasked to write a new script about The Wonderful 101 Remastered, a game that's so difficult to detail that the game's director himself, Hideki Kamiya, that magnificent psychopath, only managed to do so with a 7-minute trailer he personally cut. And it's, bemusing at best. It's an isometric action game in which you control 100 tiny superheroes at the same time and string together quirky Sentai antics to scale buildings and kill robots and junk. It's flashy and bombastic and totally idiosyncratic, but I couldn't help but feel like it was something much more than a wacky Wii U port. Like it was high art, only fit to be displayed in some esoteric art history museum alongside Katamari Damacy and Jersey Shore Family Vacation. I knew I couldn't just present it as yet another eccentric Japanese game that has a cult following in the West and then pad out the script with jokes about ska punk and nihilism, because let's face it, we're all kind of struggling right now, and trying to act like each and every one of us isn't living through one of the most disconcerting eras in modern history would be impossibly disingenuous. I had a glimmering intimation of the direction I aimed to achieve. It was a bit risky, a bit nebulous, ceremoniously self-indulgent, but it was also sincere. I wanted to dissect the value of allowing creative people to pursue their intrepid intuitions, even at the cost of marketability, and how adhering to art's long-term merits prove that audiences appreciate being trusted. But then I began to wonder, is that actually true? Let me explain. The Wonderful 101 had a bit of a turbulent development cycle. While the original pitch for the game retained its complex henshin-based combat mechanics, it was initially intended to feature a much smaller roster of Nintendo All-Star characters, a la Super Smash Bros. Executives at Nintendo didn't really care for the idea, and I can totally understand why. Kamiya is the king of getting major studios on board with preposterous proposals, but this was arguably his most extravagant endeavor to date. So, after literal years of alterations, it became a game about controlling original Sentai heroes with a bit of American comic flair, and Platinum Games got the funding to make it a Wii U exclusive. But hey, once they had their concept nailed down, construction cruised along smoothly, and everyone was happy with their work. Except for Hideki Kamiya, who thought the combat sucked noodles and needed some major punching up, pun absolutely intended, who do you think I am? How major, you ask? A mere 3 months before the game came out, players didn't have the ability to use multiple Unite morphs simultaneously, which is kind of like a fighting game without combos, or a dog relieving itself without direct eye contact. It's just not the same. Kamiya knew it needed to be done, but he also knew that there wasn't enough time to get approval from Nintendo's producers, so he just did it without asking. The higher-ups were, unsurprisingly, furious, but the steam pouring out of their ears evaporated pretty quickly because the devs implemented the idea seamlessly, and the game was instantly up to par with Kamiya and Nintendo's quality standards. There's obviously a lesson in there about rising to the occasion and doing what's right even when it means defying the powers that be, but you've seen movies, I don't need to connect those dots for you. Cut to August 2013, and The Wonderful 101 was officially released and met with, according to Wikipedia, generally positive reviews. The people who played it, for the most part, loved it, but as seen with films like Blade Runner, or albums like The Shape of Punk to Come, or prestige television dramas like Jersey Shore Family Vacation, something being really, really good doesn't necessarily translate to high sales. And if our ongoing economic meltdown has anything to say about it, if you don't generate short-term profits, you might as well not exist. Lovely messaging, isn't it? So the game fell short of sales expectations, and it's hard to argue that it wasn't because its concept is pretty much impossible to market, especially in the West. The Wonderful 101 took a risk and produced a temerarious undertaking on venturesome hardware, but it was a complete commercial calamity. And if a game this great couldn't hack it, or slash it for that matter, how could I justify writing a segment about it that defied traditional structure, praising the fact that it defied traditional structure? If people couldn't get behind a completely original entertainment experience made by industry legends, why would GameStop's audience get behind a segment aiming to explicate the value of commercial art sans commercialism? I felt defeated and overwhelmed and was tempted to snap my laptop shut and throw in the old damp dish towel. But then, like a fist made of 100 tiny Power Rangers, it hit me. The Wonderful 101 is getting a second chance for the very same reason it failed in the first place. Its cult following have been clamoring for a re-release since the advent of the Switch era because the game's many risks pay off to produce a piece of pop art that left a lasting impression unimpeded by its lack of initial commercial success. Blade Runner was a box office bomb, but if it hadn't been such an incisive film, we never would have gotten its fantastic sequel and upcoming anime adaptation. If The Shape of Punk to Come had been just another pretty okay metal album, then it wouldn't have literally shaped the sound of punk music for the next 2 decades. Likewise, if The Wonderful 101 hadn't been brave enough to stare down the barrel of opposition and do something ostentatious, then it never would have had such a successful Kickstarter, which means it never would have been remastered, which means I wouldn't have had the chance to write a segment about it in the first place. I realized that if we limit the scope of our interpretation of art to its short-term profitability, we're limiting the value of art as an institution, which doesn't serve to benefit anyone. Even the most accessible, focus-grouped, easily marketable media doesn't land with everyone, and visionaries like Hideki Kamiya and everyone else at Platinum Games not only understand that, but take solace in its inevitability and use that freedom as a foundation to fearlessly bump the lamp and make precisely what they want to make. And maybe that's exactly what we need right now. In this epoch of extreme equivocation, maybe we can find a bit of comfort in some cool art like The Wonderful 101 that's unabashedly true to itself, and maybe we can all come out of this a little less focused on the short term, a little less afraid of our own ideas of marketability, and a little more dauntless in our creativity. It was with that realization that my trepidation vanished. After seamlessly slipping in instructions to pre-order The Wonderful 101 Remastered from GameStop.com or your preferred console's online storefront, my script was finished. And even if it gets 1,000 thumbs down on YouTube and spawns a million furious Reddit threads, it was worth it to pay tribute to a game that was a bit risky, a bit nebulous, ceremoniously self-indulgent, but sincere. And hey, maybe one day that script might even get recorded and edited and paired with B-roll and turned into a full-blown segment.